it's just the stillness. It's synchronizing our brain and our body so that we go forth in our day being authentic, being real, being raw, and things come to us.
Welcome to the Things You Can't Unhear podcast. I'm your host, Maritza Barone. In this show, I will introduce you to ideas, concepts, and mindsets that will open your mind to a new world of well-being and personal life growth. Through eye-opening interviews, we elevate people in the world doing amazing things for humanity and share insights that will shift you to become the happiest, healthiest, kindest, and most compassionate version of you. Welcome to a very special episode of Things You Can't Unhear. On today's show, we'll discuss the undeniable power of the mind and body connection, live from an event in Melbourne, Australia called Conscious Conversations, where the aim of these events are to shift us to a deeper connection within ourselves and the people around us and help us to take actionable steps to be inspired to live life on purpose and experience life with our eyes wide open. As a host of these events, I wanted to be able to share the experience of the night with my listeners because I know how much you all are so passionate about learning more about mindset, perception, and importantly, self-healing techniques. When we think of the connection between the mind and body, we wanted to explore how it could help us to heal, but also how it could help us to create a life for ourselves that we truly felt aligned with. In other words, to live our life on purpose, taking control of what we create mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And to do that, we invited some well-established and notable speakers to the panel. These include Dr. Jennifer Barham-Floreani, a best-selling, award-winning author and chiropractor. Her book, Well-Adjusted Babies, has sold over 500,000 copies worldwide. And as a mother of 4 boys, Jennifer truly shows us what it means to walk your talk and has become an authentic guide for people wanting to define their own health culture. Through her writing and international talks, she's actively changing the way people perceive the chiropractic industry around the world. Her message tells us how we can take our purpose to the next level and realize the incredible connection between our mind and body to reach our best health vision. We also welcomed Shelly McKenzie, a nutritionist, naturopath, and host of the Freedom Wellness podcast. We all know our health is our biggest asset, and without it, we can't go after life's biggest desires. True? Well, Shelly gives us her insight on how to maximize our energy and vitality through the foods we eat, how we can easily avoid any unnecessary toxins that could set us back, and how we can personalize our own healthy living habits based on the lifestyle we lead. And our final speaker was Jennifer McCormack, a personal development coach and kinesiologist. She believes our mindset is the foundation of everything we perceive in the world and teaches us how we can find alignment with our business and our life goals. She gives us guidance on how to be conscious of any lingering blockages that may be preventing us from moving forward, how to find awareness in our day-to-day actions, and gives us tools on how to kickstart goals and dreams we have been too afraid to embark on. So before we start, I'd love to give a big thanks and shout out to our main sponsors for supporting our message and making the event possible. Prana Chai, Karmic Juices, Remedy Drinks, Stone and Grove, Jam HQ, and Stacked Content for recording this podcast for us today. We will have links to all of our sponsors in our show notes along with our speakers' details.
So how would you describe the relationship between mind and body? And is it the mind that comes first or the body that comes first? Or is it just literally running in duality?
The way that I would describe it is the mind comes first and then the body. But even before that comes the soul. So I'm going to go back just one step for the moment because the way that I look at things is the soul constantly speaks to us. It's always whispering to us, always directing us on our own personal path in life. A lot of us have never been taught to listen to those whispers. So from my perspective, those whispers can come through in 3 ways. One, through our intuition, And then when we ignore that, it comes through our emotions. And then once we ignore our emotions, because a lot of us tend to, it's like, yes, I'm upset, yes, I'm sad, yes, I'm angry, yes, that's fine. But we never do anything with that. So then it manifests in the physical. So technically, the way it works is our emotions set off what we call neuropeptides. And that sets off a chain reaction of chemical reactions within our body, and then it starts to affect us physically. So if we're happy, if we're sad, if we're angry, if we're in love, it's a whole different set of chemical reactions that occur. It sets off endorphins, it sets off cortisone, it sets off adrenaline, it sets off all these little things that help our body become back into balance. So when we ignore all that, that's when we feel it physically. Most of the time we feel it in our gut first, and then it disperses throughout the rest of the body. The way that I work with a lot of Chinese medicine philosophy, which is basically every emotion that we feel is assigned to an organ, is assigned to a muscle. So, for example, I had a woman come in the clinic the other day, and she had been bitten by a spider. She'd been bitten on the butt over the holidays, and because of it, she was given a double dose of antibiotics. And then she's like, yeah, and then my stomach hasn't been right, and then the left leg hasn't been right, and my knee's been a bit sore, and I've had a bit of a cough. And I'm like, you do realise they're all the same thing, because you haven't repaired the gut after having the antibiotics. So then when we look at the large intestine refers to one of the muscles down the leg, which is why she's getting sore there, which is also the lungs, hence the reason for the cough. So I went, let's go back to number one, which is the gut, repair the gut, and everything will come back into balance.
I think mind-body connection has been with us since the beginning of time. And it's still very much fundamental in Eastern philosophies. And yet in the Western world, it was about 17th century when we started to separate the mind from the body. We thought of the body as like a machine, separate with all of its organs and its parts to the mind. So when we talk about mind-body, we're not talking about mind as the brain. We're talking about the mind as our mental state, our thoughts, emotions, beliefs, experiences with different things. So like you talked about, if we start to have anxious thoughts about something, there's a chain reaction where we then release stress hormones or cortisol, which impacts the body. So it's, to answer your question, to my mind, it's always this duality of the mind being our mental state can impact our physical body, and our physical body through a lack of exercise or over-exercise or poor diet or a restricted diet or a lack of sleep, all of those things that impact our physical body can then impact our mental state.
Yeah.
Hence the mind-body connection.
Do you agree with that, Shelly, being a nutritionist and working on the body mainly?
Yeah, I definitely believe it's the mind-body. When we look at the body and, talking about the gut, our gut is called the second brain. But our first brain is still up here. And so it's getting the mind right. And as Dr. Jen just said, if we're, in a state of stress, even if we have the most healthiest digestive system, that stress is actually going to cause a ripple effect down to the body, and it's going to stop us from absorbing the nutrients, or it's going to cause digestive issues. So it's not uncommon. I think it's 1/3 of the Australian population now have gut issues, and a large part of that is due to the stress that is caused in our life. So I think, yes, that mental side definitely needs to be addressed. Of course, our gut's our second brain, and so, for instance, 90% of our serotonin, which is our happy hormone, is actually created in our gut. So we definitely can't underestimate the power of the body, but we need to get that right first upstairs.
Absolutely. Well, we all believe it, but there happens to be a lot of skeptics out there in the medical world mainly who are not backing the mind-body connection as much. What do you say to people who are skeptical about the fact that there is a connection between the mind and body and the fact that it can help us to heal?
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's exciting to have an event with women, because I just think we're the change agents.
You do have 4 sons, don't you?
I do. So it's a very testosterone house. But I think that as a generalization, women tend to lean into looking at their stories. And there are certainly men who do that, you know, if they've been in an environment that has encouraged that. But on the whole, I think women tend to lead that movement. And, you know, I was excited to see last night with Finland, with female prime minister, finance minister and education minister. And I think there's so much going on in our modern world that we can start to feel stressed by that. And so it's wonderful to have an event that reminds us about the mind-body connection, where we can tap out and try and find some kind of connection, which we'll talk about in a moment, but also where it's encouraging women to lead that conversation. Because, you know, for a long time I think there's been a whole conversation around how do women measure up, when really we've been leaders in so many ways as it is. And this is a great area to be doing that. So back to the skeptics and things like that, I think that because back in the 17th century we had that division between the mind and the body, we then went on a whole kind of journey where everything was symptom-based, and we would look at the body in parts rather than the body as a whole. And now we're starting to turn that around. And it's exciting to see the research. And what was once fringe research is now really starting to be a crusade within mainstream research. I did bring some with me because I know that you wanted to kind of put that out at the beginning. But for example, there's some, I think I've got 3 studies here. And the first one talks about a comparison between laughter yoga, which I've never heard of, but I'm up for trying that. So this is a 2009 paper where they took about 60 people and divided them into 3 groups. So there was the laughter yoga group, the anti-anxiety medication group, so they were on antidepressants, and then basically a symptomatic control group who didn't do either, but they thought that they were getting some kind of therapy. And they used a group who all had irritable bowel syndrome, which we know then if you have some kind of gut upset, because so much of the neurotransmitters or the serotonin, which makes us feel happy, has been eroded, which affects our mental states, we tend to lean towards anxiety and depression. So these were people in Iran, 60 people, all had irritable bowel syndrome and anxiety. So they divided them into one group for the laughter yoga, one group for meds, one group with nothing. And what they found was that the group with the laughter therapy all had significant improvement with their irritable bowel symptoms. The other groups had no change. And then with their anxiety levels, all groups had some improvement, but again, the yoga laughter group had the most significant change. Okay. And so then this one, which was super exciting, they looked at, they did a randomized control trial, which is where they look at all the research over a period of time. So they looked at like 15 years of what research there was to suggest that the mind-body connection could impact our health. And there was some research that suggested it could help with depression and psychosis and the mental side of that. But they wanted to see, did it impact our cells, our DNA? Did it impact our aging process or our immune responses? And so they looked through all of this research, and what they found was that there was still some significant research that was more needed, but that demonstrated that with a mind-body connection, with meditation, inflammatory markers all dropped significantly. We influenced our telomeres, which are the part of our cells that make us age. So they all were reduced. And yeah, that is good news. And it also impacted our DNA, which we'll talk about later, because our DNA can predict potentially what diseases we get. So that was exciting. But that's mainstream kind of research now. These are all studies within the last few years. But before that, there's the Heart Math Institute. A few of you, you've probably heard of that. So some leaders within this whole mindfulness area have been creating research here. And there was a gentleman who started working with them. And what he did was he took people and he asked them to hold a beaker that had a test tube of their own DNA. So you can separate your DNA. And they held it, and there were 3 groups. And so one group decided that they were asked to focus on the DNA with happy, uplifting, positive thoughts to potentially change the DNA. The second group weren't asked to do anything other than to change the DNA. And the third group weren't asked to focus on anything. And what they found was the group that were focused on positively influencing their DNA had massive changes on the DNA in the way that it wound or unwound, which is massive for disease processes.
So we can't prove how it works, can we?
Well, they are starting to. Yeah.
But we can prove that it does in fact work.
Yeah.
We talk about healing with the mind body a lot, and in particular, Louise Hay has said, has anyone heard of Louise Hay? You can hear your mind. She says that illness is an indicator of your emotional state caused by your thoughts and focus. Would you wholeheartedly agree with that?
So about 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with fructose malabsorption. And I was told that's something that you have to deal with. You just change your diet and off you go. I actually went to a dietitian and I'm like, oh, mangoes, I really want to eat mangoes. And she goes, yeah, just sprinkle some glucose powder on there and you can eat it. I'm like, okay, I get that scientifically, but nutritionally, it doesn't make sense for me to put sugar on a fruit to eat it. I know, it sounds bizarre, right? And like, I did not know anything back then about nutrition, but I'm like, that felt wrong to me. So along my journey of discovering how I could heal myself, because I knew in my mind, if I wasn't born with it, I could get rid of it. I didn't know how, but that was my mentality. What I noticed along my journey is that all these suppressed emotions started to surface. And as I was journaling all this stuff, I noticed that by the emotion that I was feeling, I could basically write a timeline on my life because it reflected everything that I had been through. And that's when I'm like, yeah, there is such a deep connection here than what we give credit for. And I believe our bodies are a pure reflection of our mental state. So for what I have noticed, especially in the last few years of practicing, is that no matter how much yoga we do, no matter how much meditation we do, no matter how much exercise we do to feel good, unless we address the underlying problem of why we do not feel good, it will surface. And I notice this particularly with people that do it on a regular basis. So if we exercise really regularly or if we meditate really regularly, but then there's a period of time where we can't for some reason, say if we have an injury and we can't exercise anymore, or sometimes if it gets to an extreme point, it's the point just before going to bed and just on rising that we feel the anxiety step in. And it's not because what we're doing during the day is not working to rebalance us, because it is, because we're still feeling good. It's because we haven't addressed the reason why we're not feeling good. And that's the most important thing, if I could give you anything to take away, is that your emotions are telling you something. It's asking you to listen. It's directing you in the right direction. Listen before it sets in physically.
Absolutely. It's the symptoms, right? Those symptoms pop up for a reason. And Dr. DeMartini says suppressing the symptoms and never getting the message of why it's there is a disservice to the whole population. Yeah. Shell, people usually wait until they're unwell to do something about their health. If we actively want to choose health first and not wait until we're unwell, how do we do that from a nutritional standpoint?
Yeah, well, I think the girls have mentioned, the body is constantly giving us whispers and we just need to listen to them. And I think that often, my journey towards becoming a nutritionist and a naturopath was because I got disease within my body. And, if I think back to all the years that I mistreated my body and didn't give it the respect it deserved, my body was giving me whispers for a long, long time, until the point where it just said, enough's enough. If you're not going to listen, I'm going to give you disease. And that's what it did. And I'm thankful for that disease because it set me on this path, and now I can help other people heal through nutrition. But yeah, I think we need to, the emotional side is 100% accurate, but we also need to tune in. The problem is a lot of us have forgotten how to tune in with our body. And so I often get clients to start with journals. So again, just writing down what their body's telling them, how foods are making you feel. And we're looking at everything. We're looking at our energy levels. You know, are you getting fatigued at certain points of the day? You stressed, like Jen just said, at certain points of the day. So, you know, we're looking at that. We're looking at digestive health as well. Are you getting bloating, gassiness, diarrhea, constipation, whatever it might be? These are all really good indicators that something is not right in your body, and we need to address that from a nutritional point of view. And we can do that once we know exactly what the symptoms are, where they're stemming from, and then we can start to bring food to implement.
I'd love to know about your personal story, though, of how you turned your illness around to health.
Yeah, so to take you back, I'm a country girl, and when, you know, I grew up in a pretty healthy family. Like, my mum did what she knew best. I played lots of sport because there wasn't much else to do in the country. And then when I moved to Melbourne, I got a whole lease on life. Like, the partying scene, come at me, you know. And so I just threw myself into that from the age of 18 to 24 years, which is when I got sick. So I lived that really typical Monday to Friday lifestyle of being healthy. Like, I did what I thought was best. And then come the weekend, I was binge drinking. I was going through the, you know, KFC at 3 a.m. and then again at 10 a.m. when I surfaced. And, you know, that was pretty typical for me for years and years and years. And at the time, I loved it. Like, it was so different to what I had experienced. And then again, as I said, like, I remember my mum's a nurse, and so I remember ringing her throughout this period going, "Mum, like, this is going on." And she's like, "Shelly, like, God, come off it." And I just kept going, "Oh, whatever. And I was personal training at the time. Like, I was a personal trainer, believe it or not. So that's where that typical Monday to Friday lifestyle came in. Like, I'd exercise really hard and just eat and then binge. And so when I was 24, I was heading back to the country to visit my parents, and I started feeling really achy. It's a 3-hour drive, and I thought, I'll book in for a massage when I get home, and that'll make me feel better. So I booked in for a massage and went and had that, and I got home. Mum said, "How are you feeling?" I said, "I'm just going to go to bed, not feeling well." By the next morning, I couldn't move. I remember laying in bed, and I was so physically weak that I couldn't even get out. And I had to ring my parents, and my dad had to literally come up and pick me up out of bed and take me to the couch. And this was on a Saturday or something, and I really quickly started to decline in my health from that point onwards. So I lost, over a 4-week period, it basically was, I lost over 10 kilos from the size I am now, pretty much. I couldn't keep any food down. It was coming out both ends. I had to have 2 iron infusions because the first one didn't take, and my iron was pretty much non-existent. And after going and seeing the doctors time and time again, they just couldn't work out what was wrong. And I ended up being on 24-hour supervision at home, and doctors had to come and see me because I was too weak and too sick to actually go and visit them. And eventually my diagnosis went from she's got some form of cancer to I brought a parasite back home with me when I'd been traveling. And that was obviously a really scary time. And eventually they landed, I say, somewhere in the middle with a disease called Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is quite common, I'm going to say now, and a lot of women do experience it. But at the time, I didn't know what that was. And I was heading over to India for a 6-week period to ride a motorbike down the coastline with my now husband. And of course, doctors advised me not to go, and so did my parents, but I was going to go. So the doctor sent me off with a bag of medication. And I will just say a little disclaimer, like, I believe in Western medicine, and I think there is a time and a place for medication. But for me personally, I knew that there was more I could do. I knew I hadn't been living my best life. I knew I'd been doing a disservice to my body. And so for me, I knew that making lifestyle changes and dietary changes was going to be the best thing. So first things to go was gluten and dairy. Again, only knowing the basics of nutrition, what I'd been taught in my PE course. But I just knew that they weren't sitting well in my body. And now we know that gluten's actually a direct attacker for the thyroid, and the dairy was causing a huge amount of inflammation in my body. And so, you know, they were the first two things to go, and that was what my body told me when I actually stopped and listened. And from there, I went on this massive journey. I, you know, went over to India. I had a great time, but was sick. But while I was over there, I used lots of herbs and spices, and I went on a plant-based diet to try to reduce the inflammation in my body. And then I was on plant-based for too long, having iron problems. And so then I went to a paleo diet, and I literally tried it all. And then eventually I even went and did a bodybuilding competition because I decided that this alcohol was no longer serving me. And I needed a really good why to tell my friends why I wasn't drinking anymore, because I was the party girl. And so I went off alcohol for over 2 years and refined sugar at the same time. And for that 2-year cycle, I threw myself into the world of bodybuilding and did all these fitness competitive shows. And, you know, people find that really weird. I'm on stage in a bikini and stripper heels, but, you know, it was great. I loved it. But, you know, so that was pretty much it. And so, and sort of in the midst of all of that and coming out of the bodybuilding stuff, this is years later after I still am not on medication and I'm just still trying to work out how to heal my body best, I decided to start studying nutrition, because by this stage, doctors are going, why aren't you on your medication? You should be on medication by now. You know, you've got to take these pills every day for the rest of your life. And as a 24-year-old, that just seemed ridiculous that I had to take a pill every day for the rest of my life that was going to control my energy, my moods, how I felt, my digestive health, just everything. So when we tune into our body, like our body, our temple, it is our medicine. And if we actually listen to what's going on, it has all the answers for us. We just have lost that disconnect.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating story, and I'm so glad that you turned it around to good health and now you're teaching everyone else about it. But there's something else that we all suffer from, and that's stress. No matter who we are, all of us in some way suffer from stress. Jennifer, I know you work with people to reduce their stress levels, because stress is a massive disease striker in all of us. How do we bring our stress levels down and get ourselves sort of in that relaxed state so that disease doesn't occur within us?
I think the first thing that I have taught myself is to become more self-aware. So when we become a little bit more self-aware, we can identify the emotions that we're feeling. So the biggest question that I encourage everyone to ask himself is literally, how do I feel right now? Because that reconnection back with self, just through that simple question, is going to help you identify, am I in a stress state or am I not? Because most of us don't realize we're stressed when we are stressed. So just coming back to that self-awareness, how do I feel right now? How do I want to feel? So when we go, okay, I'm not feeling great, I'm feeling a little shit right now, how do I get myself to the next step? And when we look at our emotions go on a scale. They start at the bottom at shame and blame, and they go all the way up to enlightenment. Now, what a lot of us try and do is go, yep, I'm in a shit state, let's get up there. It's just not possible. We're almost setting ourselves up for failure if we're expecting ourselves to go from feeling absolute crap to feeling on top of the world. It's just taking one step at a time. Just going, oh, yep, I feel shame right now. Anger is actually better than shame. And, you know, depression can be a little bit better than what I'm feeling right now. So instead of trying to jump the emotional scale too massively, it's just take one step. It's learning to be kinder to ourselves. Going, you know what, I am human. This is where I am. How do I get to the next point? I teach a lot of that through meditation as well. And I teach meditation a little bit differently. I do a lot of healing visualizations, I could call it. And it's literally taking yourself into your body, going within and questioning yourself, becoming more self-aware, asking yourself all those questions that you need to recognize exactly where you are now. And what we learn in mindfulness is where you are is exactly where you need to be. The aim is to never get rid of anything. You don't want to get rid of where you are, but you want to learn from it and work through it. And it's when we fully embody that emotional state that we are currently in, it automatically transcends. But what a lot of us tend to do is to push it away or to cover it up. But when we fully sit in that emotion, it disappears automatically. I'll give you a little example. 3 years ago now, I lost my little girl at 20 weeks. And the week after, I cried constantly. Day after day, night, morning, all the time, I just cried and cried and cried and cried. And 5 days later, I remember being on the phone to my dad, and I said to him, Dad, I'm sick of crying. I don't want to cry anymore. Like, I've really felt what it feels like to sit in grief. And he laughed at me. My dad is a Buddhist mindfulness teacher. And he can hear this little giggle. I'm like, what was he fucking laughing at? And he goes, so what's next? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I get to choose. And it's the first time I've actually fully embodied that feeling of I actually get to choose now where I go next. And I can tell you, it wasn't enlightenment, but it was the next step further from grief. So the moment we fully embody that feeling and don't try and push it away, there's so many people that said to me, oh, you need to go back to work, get yourself busy, go for a walk. And I'm like, no. I actually just want to sit and cry. And it's when you fully feel into that, it transcends.
You acknowledge the pain and then you can move through it, right?
Yeah.
I know you work to reduce stress in a lot of your clients. Do you have a technique that you can share with us?
I have many techniques, but I will guide you through just one today.
Anyone want to reduce their stress levels?
Right now?
Yes.
Can we all think of one right now? Yeah? Okay. I invite you all to close your eyes. And let's just bring to the surface your current stress. Can be event, can be a feeling, can be anything. I just want you to tune into your physical body. And with the feeling of this emotion, this thought in the front of your mind, I want you to go down into your body, starting at the top of your head, working your way down to the tips of your toes. And I want you to notice where in your body this feeling sits. And sometimes we notice it like an object. Sometimes it's just a ball of light or darkness. Just want you to notice where it is. Notice how big it is. See if you can put a centimetre value to it. Notice what shape it is. Does it have a colour? Is the colour opaque or transparent? If you tap on it, does it make a sound? Notice the space around this object. And if it could talk to you, what would it say? Notice what it's telling you. As you're looking at this, I want you to turn up the colour to be nice and bright, as if the sun is shining a light on it. And I want you to really feel into it. How does it feel? I want you to look at this as if it's a balloon. And I want you to pop all that feeling and fill that balloon up. The balloon probably sits at about 10% full. I want you to keep filling the balloon up and keep expanding it. Noticing how the balloon gets bigger, the feeling gets more intense, the colours get brighter, the sound, if there's sound, it gets noisier. And as the balloon gets to about 40% full and it keeps expanding, the feeling gets even greater and it expands and it keeps going, it keeps filling up the feeling is even more intense. You can feel it not just in that part of your body, but in your whole being. And as it feels from 70 to 80%, you can feel it in your breath. You can feel it in your heart space. From 80 to 90, the balloon still can be expanded more further. That feeling gets more intense. That floods your whole system. From 90 to 100, and it's still there. We can feel it all. Fill that balloon up just that little bit further. Fill it all the way up until it pops. Watch it pop. Watch the fragrance float away. Notice the feeling that is left. Now ask yourself, what is the next 2 things I need to do to move forward? And when you're ready, you can come back into the room.
Welcome back, everyone. Your faces changed throughout that, actually. It was interesting to see them go from sort of tense looking to more relaxed. Thanks, Jennifer. Well, I want to turn it around now and talk about what Louise Hay talks about, the type of diseases that we get versus the types of thoughts that we have. I think that's a big one. I mean, even with eczema, for example, what causes eczema? Is it something that we're eating, or is it a particular thought that we're having?
I think eczema is a great example. We often see it in little people, babies, children. So it's hard to imagine then what could they possibly be thinking that would manifest as eczema. So I think it brings up then a great conversation in and around inflammation. And so inflammation is where our immune system just goes rogue. And it can happen for a number of reasons. And inflammation drives chronic disease. So easily 56% of our adult population, 50% of all kids, have some form of chronic disease at the moment, driven by inflammation. So inflammation can have different driving factors. So for kids, which is something, I deal a lot with, it can be more the journey that's happened for them of different factors that consciously or unconsciously have happened with decisions parents have made in preconception or prior to conceiving, during pregnancy, the birth process, childhood, even before that, epigenetics, decisions parents and grandparents have made, which sounds crazy, and we'll get to that with DNA. But inflammation can be driven as a cumulative thing, typically speaking, for any of us. And it can be up and down, and it's a health journey. So when I see eczema in kids, I'm always asking questions of what's gone on to date, how do we calm the inflammation in that baby, that child, if they're still breastfeeding, how do we calm the inflammation in the mum, all of those questions. When eczema, I guess, shows up for an adult or any skin condition, acne, any of those things, again, it comes back to our body is giving us a cue, a symptom that if we can tune into and think, well, I have teenagers in my house as well, and it's a lot of their friends come and visit and they have acne. And I say to my boys, their acne isn't due to a lack of Roaccutane. It's not. There's a reason they have acne. And because they've lived with me for eternity, they're also going, oh, Mum, I've seen what he eats and, I try and kind of hedge him this way. And so there's always a reason, whether it's eczema or acne or any skin condition, any health condition, typically speaking, comes back to some form of inflammation on that health decline. Anything to add?
I'm going to go back to your original question of thoughts.
Yeah.
Because there is those 2 aspects. One, it's the toxicities that we're consuming that's coming out through the skin. But what I like to go is to why are we consuming those toxicities in the first place? Most of them is because we are, I don't like using that word, uneducated. on what to and not to put in our body, because we're exposed to so much food. How do we know if they're bad on a general basis until we look in it further? When we look at the emotions, so I was that kid in primary school that had the eczema, and it was all over the backs of my legs, and I've had it since birth. Now, to tell you my story with my eczema, I decided to study kinesiology when my baby was 6 months old. Don't do it. Don't go studying when the puppy's like little. So I walked into class one day and I had the eczema on my arm, which is another place where I would get it, and on my thighs. And I was so stressed, and my teacher looked at me and goes, on the table. And it was red and it was raw and it was inflamed and it was hideous. And in the back of my mind, I'm going, oh, I would really, really love to do a before and after photo, but I didn't. And he put me on the table, and what he discovered as he was treating me was exactly what you were saying. It was generational. It was actually emotions that my grandfather went through his time that had come through the lines, and now I had it. Now, when I actually look back at my grandfather, I was just lucky I know those people. My dad has eczema and my grandfather did as well. So coming off the table, within half an hour, the inflammation reduced. Within 3 days, all the eczema was gone, and I've never, ever had it back before. And it blew my mind. So that's when I went, yep, this kinesia thing is it's right for me. But when we look at eczema and the skin, I like to look at, yes, there is something toxic within our thoughts that is trying to get out, and it's coming out through the skin. So with traditional Chinese medicine, I also look at where on the body it is, what muscle, meridian, organ is it connected to, and what does it mean. So, okay, let's go for myself. So on the arm, we look at the inability to ask for help. And myself as an early mother, that's something I never did, was go, I need help here because I have no friggin' idea what I'm doing and I'm kind of crumbling. And it was just coming out through my body because I was just so good at keeping it all in.
Going back to inflammation, we know it's a lot of the root cause with most of diseases. When we've got inflammation, Shell, how can we bring it down with food?
There's certain foods that could potentially be triggering someone, and that's your main gluten, dairy, sugar and alcohol, which most people are familiar with. If we're going organic, if you can't go fully organic, I highly recommend Googling at least the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 and making sure that the Dirty Dozen, you're always eating organic, just so you're lowering those pesticides and chemicals that we're putting into our body. And the Clean 15 are your 15 top foods that you can eat non-organically, and they are pretty good in terms of pesticides and chemical loads. You know, getting in your essential fatty acids or your beautiful fatty fishes are really important, your avocados, those sorts of things. Yeah.
What about preservatives in our food? What should we be looking out for that causes inflammation?
Yeah, look, I think if we go to more of a whole-based diet and just eat less packaging, we're going to be on the right path. When it comes to preservatives, there is so many. And there's a really great app which I shared on your podcast when I jumped on there called Chemical Maze. And so I don't have my head wrapped around every single preservative out there, but if you jump on Chemical Maze, you can pin in the number of preservative that it is, whether it be a chemical preservative, so something you put in on your body, or whether it's from the food you eat. And that will give you a little green smiley face if it's okay, or it'll give you a negative face if it's, say, derived from petrol, which many of those preservatives are. So yeah, definitely trying to stick to as less packaged if you can. If you're going for packaged foods, just try to make sure that it is 8 ingredients or less is best, and ideally try to recognize all of those foods. But yeah, there's no doubt that a whole food diet is definitely best when it comes to inflammation.
It's just stripping it back to basics really with our diet, isn't it? You did mention something to me actually that I've continued to listen to throughout my shopping now is the star ratings on packets aren't really reliable, are they?
No.
Mic drop.
So, there's so many questions I've got about that and how they get around actually putting that on the packets, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah, look, no, don't. I actually have a lot of clients that still really rely on those 5-star ratings and those health ratings, which is understandable because it's being marketed so well. But again, it's just another marketing ploy. So yeah, definitely. Again, stick to when it comes to packaged foods, 8 ingredients or less. Make sure that you know each ingredient that's in there. When we're looking at things like our sugars, a really good reading to go by is per 100 grams, 15 grams or less of sugar is going to be better and going to serve your body well. And always comparing everything by the 100 grams because companies can put their own per serving on there, and so they can make up whatever serving size they want to make their product look better against their competitors. So always be comparing against the 100 gram panel. But yeah, don't go by the per serving. Just follow those really, I think, easy rules. And the other thing, navigating the supermarket, I'm sure we've all heard it, but just stick to your outsides. Try not to go down the aisles. Even your health food aisle nowadays has got a lot of foods that are really, really confusing. So ideally, if we're to stick into the vegetables, to the meats and to the frozen like cheese, dairy section, that's going to serve us best. And shopping at your local farmers markets. I think most of us are pretty local, and if you're not, then we've all got farmers markets locally to us. And so really just try to support your locals and your farmers, and talking to them about their produce. I go to my butcher every week and he loves it. I swear, he raves on about where he's, got his cow from this week and blah, blah, blah. And I love it too. So, they love talking about their produce. So just ask the simple questions. Where do you get this from? Is it chemical free? Is it being fed grains? Is it hormone free? Those sorts of questions, just ask, and they will love talking about it. But butchers talk a lot. So just be warned. Do you want to add?
Jen, yeah, you've got what you call a wellness lifestyle. Can you explain what that means to you and how you bring that into your family?
Sure. I guess, the beauty of my work being an author and sometimes in the practice is I get to dive into the research and things that have meaning for me. So, I've been as my kids call, a food Nazi for a long time. But talking about organic food, I guess taking it to another level is because we all have people in our life who say, you don't need to do organic. That's just, for the uppity people. And what we need to realize is that with the pesticides that have been used for so long, there's a whole conversation in and around glyphosate. Glyphosate is known as Roundup. And Roundup is now everywhere. So it's not only on fruit and veg, it's on cotton products, it's in our wine, it's in school parks, golf courses, everywhere, because Roundup has been used for a long, long time. It's in our water. The reason I bring this up, just so it's another little gem for you and another reason to go, yes, this is why I prioritise our budget towards buying as much organic as I can, or, the Clean 15, that sort of thing. Glyphosate drives inflammation. So it creates that leaky gut that we've all heard about. Beyond that, though, it drives any of the heavy metals that are in your body into your brain. And we see it a lot with kids who are on the spectrum. So glyphosate's a big thing, and it's great to know about it because it empowers you with why you spend money like you do. Every person in our supermarket, and I'm talking about, I go around the edge and they get great organic produce. They know they know me by name because I'm there all the time. I spend money. It's that community like you were talking about. They love providing us with high quality things when they can, and when you're empowered, you lead that whole movement. But back to the wellness lifestyle, I guess for me, I was a chiro baby. My dad had been a radiographer initially, my mum a nurse. And I'm the youngest of 6 children. So they had made that transition from Western medicine to, I guess, holistic practitioners when I was a baby. So they were dabbling in it. So our home wasn't completely holistic, and it was very much my journey as well. But it's something that then, like any of you become incredibly passionate about. And when you live it, influences, not only your kids, but people around you. And so I guess for me, if you're asking what does that look like, it's, with the boys, it's the health culture that we have in our household that, a Band-Aid doesn't do the curing. A pill or a potion doesn't do the curing. Our body and its innate capacity to heal and thrive is what does the healing. Any symptom is, again, like we've talked about, a cue from our body. If they have a tummy ache, is it because they've eaten glue all day? Have they gone out with their mates on the holiday and had a massive pizza and then on their way home, decided to have a burger and then come home and go, oh, Mum, I shouldn't have eaten that. I'm like, you think? And we can do that from a young age. Whatever our child is experiencing, remind them and say, what do you think your body's trying to tell you? What does it feel about what you've eaten? And not to the point where it's an allergy, because we get a lot of cues well before that. Being someone who walks their talk with wellness, it's not just about the physical things. From a young age, probably like many of you, it was the environment where if they would say something out loud of, oh, I can't do that, it's like, stop. Where did that thought come from? And a lot of us have these thoughts repeatedly through our day, through our week, through our year that we've gotten from somebody else. That's self-limiting. And so, from the youngest age, reminding them that they can do anything. And when they flip into limiting themselves, to just have that habit of watching their thoughts, because we aren't our thoughts. Like if we're talking about mind, body, that mental state, all of us can have that habit throughout the day of being conscious of our thoughts. So I'll give you an example. This morning, I was making a green smoothie and I'd put in my barley grass and my spirulina and all those things, and I'd tasted it, and then I put it in my mouth and I got the teaspoon stuck in the roof of my mouth. And my first thought was, oh my God, woman drives herself to the doctor with a teaspoon stuck in her mouth. And I was like, where did that thought come from? In that moment of, what am I going to do here? And of course you take it out. But what I'm bringing up is, we have so many thoughts throughout the day, and they run a program. They tell us, oh, you can't do that, or what if you run late, or, oh, you're not good enough, all of those things. All of us have the capacity to have mastery over our thoughts and check in on them, because there is a space between those thoughts. And that's what, that mind-body connection does for me, is to try and keep my state even throughout the day, which is a Buddhist principle of being in the Tao, being in the moment, versus this pendulum of, oh shit, the dog's gotten out, or I'm running late, whatever it is, to just being in the now and going, who is that having that thought? Where did that come from? And bringing it back to the moment.
You're right. The only thing that no one can control in all of us is our perception of anything, which is
absolutely
exciting. We can always bring it back to that.
Yeah.
I want to touch on DNA and genetics. Are we bound by our genes when it comes to illness? I mean, you see so many people have breast cancer run in the family, or diabetes run in the family, or mental illness run in the family. Are we bound by this? Are we doomed, or can we turn it around?
I think when we were talking about myths before, some of the biggest ones are that, oh, my health, it's determined by bad germs in the environment, bad luck, bad genes. My mum had anxiety, I'm going to get anxiety. My dad had a heart attack, I'm going to have a heart attack. It's a culture that we've been led to believe. And so, yes, there are a very few mutations within our DNA that make some people vulnerable to specific diseases. For the vast majority of us, though, there's 20,000 different types of genes in our body which govern all of our body functions. With that, all of us have genes that could lean us towards cancer, could lean us towards heart disease, could lead us towards depression and anxiety. We all have them in our genetic environment. The reason why we're seeing so much chronic illness, all the modern diseases that we have, kids on the spectrum, anxiety, all of those things, is because the main thing that's changed is our environment. So if we looked at a river or a lake system and all the fish were dying, or they had cancerous tumours, the biologists wouldn't go and give the fish drugs or cut out the cancerous tumours. Biologists would look at the environment and think, what has changed that has led to that outcome of all of those fish being sick? And yet we live in a society that looks at our cancer, that looks at our shoulder pain, that looks at our eczema and gives us a pill or a potion for that, versus asking us a whole lot of broad questions of what's going on in our environment and then the larger environment as well. And so the reason we're seeing such an escalation in diseases is we are triggering genes like never before in history. And we're doing it because most of our DNA is, yes, within our cells, but our bacteria, which is our microbiome, which is the super organ of our body, has its own DNA. So when our gut is unhealthy, we are triggering the DNA in our gut. And we're also triggering DNA in our mitochondria, which some of you might have heard, which are energy centers. And so when we lay out what's happening, there's a reason so many kids and adults are sick, and we've massively changed our environment. And that inward journey of getting our gut right, looking for why our body is out of balance, is a massive part of that. And to answer your question, mind-body connection plays a massive role in influencing our DNA.
It's good to know we have the power there, isn't it? Because you're not doomed by your genes. Now, I think you guys have proven that the mind-body connection can work for healing, but it's something exciting else out there that it can also work for. And Dr. Joe Dispenza, who I'm sure many of you have heard of, says he saw the connection help to heal sick people and then wondered how it would work on well people to create a life of purpose. So this is where it gets exciting for the people who don't have physical healing to do, to say, I'm going to take control of my life and I'm going to actually create the life that I want to live. Now, how do we identify a life of purpose when it comes to using the mind and body connection to do it?
It's interesting because I'm in the middle of finishing a book kind of on this subject, which is, first and foremost, I believe we need to start to identify that we're spiritual beings in a physical body, that at the core we are 99.99% energy and 0.001% matter. And if you read Joe Dispenza's book, he goes into that in very scientific terms, but we are so focused on that 0.1% that we forget that we are mainly energy. So even if we are not well, and we can still use our healing to come back into focus in alignment with who we are. And we are on this planet to create, to co-create, to have an experience. That is purely what we are here for. Everything else is just a bonus. What difference do I want to make in the world? And it doesn't have to be on a grand scale. Once we have a goal, and it doesn't have to be a lifelong goal, it can be a 5-year goal or whatever, then to manifest on that consciously, it's almost like every decision I make throughout every single day in my life is either taking me one step closer to that or one step away from that. And that's really interesting because I used to be that sort of person that hated making decisions. In my 20s, I'm like, give me a fairy godmother so I can just palm off all the decision making to her and she can make the right decision for me. But when I learnt that, I'm like, it is so easy to make the right decision for you. When you know where you're going and it's alignment with you, it's, is this decision right for me or not? Is it taking me closer to where I want to go or further away? But what I notice is that when we go back to our emotions and our physicality, our whispers from the soul, they're telling us what direction to go in anyway. So in the book that I am writing that's not published, it literally goes, if you're experiencing this emotion, if you're experiencing this sore muscle, it is telling your body this. For example, when we have, let's go to the large intestine, okay? So our large intestine, everyone that comes to me with inflammation in their large intestine, it is because they do not value themselves enough. there is some sort of self-worth at the core of their problem. So we can go through every muscle and every organ and connect it to the issue. So when looking at that, we can direct ourselves on any manifesting path we want that is aligned with us. And that is really important because most of us have never aligned our life with truly what we want. So setting goals that is congruent with us is one of the most important things in part of manifestation, or else we will not manifest. The reason why most of us do not get what we want is because on some level we do not want it. Because if you're in alignment with what you want, law of attraction says like attracts like. That energy particle that is 99.9% energy attracts to it like energy. And what science also tells us is that energy next to it can influence that particle. So if you are in a negative state, you attract negative people towards you, or negative experiences, or not so good feeling experiences. But when you're in alignment with yourself and you're positive, and be careful, you need to be positive not just in thought, but embodying that positivity, because we can lie to ourselves a lot too, that we attract that positive experience towards us and those positive people and events. So if you are in a negative environment, you're going to attract negative stuff to you because that is influencing you, whether you like it or not. We can't turn a blind eye to what is in our proximity. And that's why they say proximity is power. So by tuning into you, your muscles, your organs, your body, your intuition, it will guide you into manifesting whatever you want. And if we just take that one step up the emotional scale, it highes our vibration. And that is all we have to focus on, is the way we feel.
I was getting goosebumps listening to you. And to hear that, and it is certainly about your vibration, which is something Joe Dispenza does a lot in his seminars. In my experience, it's also about trusting and surrendering to what's yours will come to you when the timing is right. And there's that saying of, opportunity only knocks once. I don't believe that. I think opportunities come again and again when the timing is right. And so, like I mentioned earlier, I grew up in a family of health practitioners, holistic health practitioners. So we tend to get exposure to a lot of personal development. So from a very, very young age, I was setting lots of goals, hundreds of goals in goal books and goal boards, all of those things. And there were some things that were fundamental. I wanted to be a chiropractor. At that time, my dad was a chiropractor and two of my brothers, and then there were the four girls. I wanted to be the first female chiropractor. And damn, some of my sisters got in before me. I wanted to be an author. At the time, I thought that I'd write some romantic fiction or something like that. I wanted to marry a chiropractor who was part Italian. And
Only part?
Yeah, only part, And I wanted to have four boys, which is random, I know, but I would affirm that whenever we'd play Barbies, I was the Barbie doll, as gorgeous as she was, I wouldn't have thought that she would have had four boys, but I always had four boys. I wanted to take chiropractic to celebrities, and I also wanted chiropractic at that point in my life, and now I have an enormous appreciation for holistic healthcare and that whole paradigm. But at the time, it was take chiropractic to families across the globe as the leading form of healthcare, because I grew up in a practice and I would see my friends have headaches or period pain or bedwetting and come and be adjusted and have enormous change. So I was like, yep, I'm going to help take that to the world. And so through that process, I would set goals every year, like I said, the goal boards, all of those things. And there is an energy with that intention. And it's like for you guys, there's a reason you're sitting in this room. And there's a reason that we're speaking. There's an intentionality to the universe. And it's like when a sperm and an ovum come together and create an embryo, and those cells divide and divide and divide. Those cells don't have to think, I should become a baby. That's what I should do. There's just an intentionality. And it's like, the acorn becomes the oak tree, the flower becomes the blossom, all of that. And so there's a reason for all of us. And I learned that from a very, very young age, and it was something that I just trusted. And So as life unfolds, I became a chiropractor. I married a chiropractor who was half Italian. We have 4 boys. True story. I have adjusted Katy Perry on the floor, Jennifer Aniston, a whole heap of people. And I bring that up because it gives merit to the power of manifesting. The celebrities I've met and coached with their children there's some other energy going on. And we have 4 boys. And a big part of personal development is also living your life in a congruent way. And so there were times where I realized that my outward journey to have success, to achieve certain things in that anal retentive way of write these books, get this award, do that, there were so many times where I would pull back in and go, it's not about that. It's about this internal journey. And I would have rituals in my life with the mind-body connection, with meditating. And I can see in retrospect now, there were so many times because I could tick off this little manifesting list that I'd get a little bit demanding. It was like a kind of universal shopping list that I'd put out to the universe. And it was demanding. And I would realize that after a while and think, there's more to this. And so after traveling a lot with the book and all of those things, I dialed it back in and got to a place where I realized that the universe was calling me to be a little bit more adult, a little bit more mature with that. And while I was incredibly proud of living a values-driven life, I realized I can't raise my children twice, so I minimized my practice entirely. I was focused very much on being a mum at home, writing, doing those things. So I was proud of that. But I realized that I had these other massive goals and I needed to step it up. And so I started doing a lot of Joe Dispenza's week-long seminars, all of those things. And I had, physical changes in my body, which was wonderful. And there's a synchronicity to the universe because at the same time, I probably had the biggest challenges in my life. So there was a lot of scrutiny within the allied health professions. We're still working through that. My book was banned, even though it had sold, amazing numbers of copies. My husband had his license suspended for a period. All of these things happened. I spent 12 months defending our profession, defending holistic healthcare with regulatory bodies. We also then had this journey where we did a property development, which went incredibly bad. If you can think of the best drama series you've ever seen, with private investigators and the federal police and embezzlement and all of these things that this man did that are still, they're finally finishing up. But it was a 4-year window that was so hard. And at the same time, I was learning a lot of these skills. I'd lived this poster child life of personal development, and now I felt like I was being so squeezed. And there were days where I couldn't answer emails, I couldn't answer my phone, I couldn't get out of bed because I was so inflamed. I had dark thoughts, my chest was aching, my mum had a heart attack, and the thoughts would start of, what if you get a heart attack? And I had to get back to fundamental rituals in my day, which didn't mean that my thoughts were amazing all day, but it meant that I had that awareness. And we often hear when people come through something like that, it was, so hard, but you just didn't quit. And so now we're at the other side and all of these opportunities are opening up, and I can see why all of those things have happened. And so I guess the reason I tell all of that is my personal relationship with mind-body connection has gone from this kind of pushy personal development side, which has been amazingly successful, to then realizing I was being grabby and a bit demanding with the universe, to then really having to dive deep and take a seat with the sole purpose of feeling safe in the universe, feeling connected to my maker, to getting back to the fact that my life has a purpose, and that connection, because I wasn't getting it from anyone else. It had to come from there. And someone said to me the other day, what do you think people really want? And I think it's connection and safety. And yes, we can get it from people and we can have the illusion that we get it through social media, but the greatest connection we get is when we tune into our maker and just have that stillness. And I think it really brings us back to that intentionality, that blueprint for our life of why we're here. And that's very different to, I talk about this, that's living a life of purpose that can be up and down and being of service to things that serve, rather than just wanting to have significance, which is, I think, where a lot of people get these days. They look at people on social media and they think, oh, they get so many likes, they're so popular, they're such an influencer, but that can be short-lived. To live a life of influence is incredibly rewarding. And so that's a kind of, that journey of up and down and what it can mean at different levels.
Purpose is a big topic that comes up a lot these days, and people are trying to explore that. And thank you for sharing all of your personal stories. I think it's amazing. But when it comes to finding our purpose, it's said that choosing the impact first and then following that impact with a business idea or a goal is the way to find your purpose. How else would you describe finding your purpose, or a way to navigate finding your purpose?
I feel that with all of us, our purpose will be revealed to us when we're ready to hear it and we're ready to see it. I mean, I look at myself, I started my career as a fashion designer. Spent 15 years in fashion design. Do I regret that? Absolutely not. Because it trained me to be resilient. It trained me to be so many things. It also trained me to listen to myself, because I got so sick at the end of it that I literally couldn't do anything else. So it's like listening to yourself and tuning into yourself. I think tuning into yourself is the biggest gift that anyone can have, and your purpose comes out of that. Your passions come out of that. It's like, what makes me feel good? What lights me up? When I speak to somebody, who lights me up? They're the person that you need to be around. That's the things that you need to do. Just go with the way you feel all the time, and it'll show you your purpose.
I agree, totally, wholeheartedly. Now, when it comes to meditation, how influential was that in your manifestation when you were working towards your goals?
Sure. When I hear you talk, Jen, I think that the meditation, the tuning in, just that still quietness, for me, helped me realise my purpose. So for me, that's a why in and around creating time for me. Now, when I was doing some of the dispenser stuff, we were doing 3 to 4 hour long meditations, and that doesn't happen at home. Some days I don't even actually physically sit down and meditate, but I have things that tune me in. So my point is, if we create a ritual where on most days we can have that mind-body connection. For me, I do a lot of breathing activities, which is something that Joe teaches, and I'll talk about in a minute. But if you're sitting here thinking, well, how the heck do I find my purpose? Then that really comes back to that mind-body connection, because when we get still, when we stop this busy mind chatter, the narcissist in our head, when we get still, we don't necessarily have to have this big loud voice that says you're meant to do this. It's just the stillness. It's synchronizing our brain and our body so that we go forth in our day being authentic, being real, being raw, and things come to us. Versus if we're scrolling all day, we start to second guess ourselves, we feel like we're not enough, and then we kind of react and bounce off everything, and there's friction in our life. The biggest gift that meditation gives me is feeling like this is who I am, and I have that connection to be all that I'm meant to be. And so that's I guess where the manifesting comes from, because then those things come to you.
Who here meditates? A lot of you. Probably about half of you. It's a hard thing to sort of introduce yourself to when you've never done it before.
And, I think that I have people in my life who do a lot of the transcendental meditation. I haven't done that. My husband was always this kind of spiritual person, and I very much came from that personal development. So I was like, come on, let's who's got time, And part of this recent journey with Dispenser is, and if I can share it with you, for those of you who aren't necessarily meditating, what I loved about it was he does this breathing where, and you can get his stuff online, you can buy his CDs and things, but the breathing changed everything for me, because when we talk about emotions and feelings, most of us are stuck in the lower energy centers of our body, the primal energy centers, the fear, the anxiety, the just overdrive, versus accessing the full energy of mind and body being connected. And he realizes this, and he teaches us these breathing techniques where basically he's got this great music and you visualize kind of squeezing all of your different energy centers and bringing this breath up through and then holding it. And you literally feel like you're going to blow your head off. And you do it to music and you do it over and over. And he has some then where you draw the energy down. And if you do it enough, like the first few times you do it, you might think, oh, is this really working? Is it really working? But if you stick with it, I promise you, you will then, as you breathe out, you just feel the energy of your physical body expanding. And when you can open yourself up to that, you realize that there's some other connection going on. It's amazing. So for me, it's not necessarily just I guess how other people meditate. A lot of the time it's that breath work. Once I've done that, once I feel like I've opened up all of my energy centers and connected above, I then go through things that I'm grateful for, which is a great emotion, things that have happened in my life that are true blessings. And then I shift it to things that I'm excited about and that bring me joy. And that's where the manifesting happens. And I set that vision and intention, and then I trust and I let it go, because I know that the universe or God or the maker or whoever has a better plan than I ever can.
There's obviously 50% of people here who haven't meditated. What is the first step to introducing that into your life? Whoever wants to answer that.
It's interesting because I take myself back 10 years ago. I was like, I can't meditate. My mind was just like on a sort of roller coaster. For me, I started meditating when I was running, because I'm consciously a very rhythmic runner. So focusing on that breath while I was running or while swimming was my meditative state. It's just like Jen was saying, it's about breath more than anything. But now, even when I get to that space, now when I want to meditate, sometimes it's literally, yes, it's about breathing, but sometimes I just like to strip back my layers, which is that mum layer, strip it back. That wife layer, that girl, that woman, that business owner, that healer, whatever you label that you put on yourself, to strip it back and just connect in with that pureness of yourself. You are not your skin, you are not your bones, you're not your beautiful hair. You're just connecting in with that inner being. So I'm a very visual person, so that visualization really works for me. It's like I imagine myself what I look like as a mum. Taking back to the pureness, I find, is the most easiest way. As you said, there's so many different meditations. So my dad was in a Buddhist monastery for 5 years, and what Buddhists do, they clear their mind totally, and they spend all day, sometimes 24 hours, meditating. Don't expect yourself to do that. I can't even do that. I've meditated for years. Like, clearing your mind of absolutely everything is really hard. So it's like, take the first step from where you are. Visualization meditations are great. I always suggest to all my clients, jump onto YouTube, pop in a keyword that you want to feel and go meditation XYZ, something will come up. Yeah. Look at the pictures, find one that you go, yep, let's try it on. There's meditations from 15 minutes to 4 hours. This is the biggest one I've seen. But it's literally get someone to guide you through it. Don't expect to do it yourself alone.
Just start.
Just start.
Yeah.
If any of you are in a big stress cycle, the just start thing came up for me then, of doing the breathing activities. And then another step can be imagining just handing over any of the challenges you feel are coming up for you in your life, whether it's a work decision, something with your child, your relationship, whatever it is. And I do this a lot of the time. I literally hand them over like a big balloon, because there's a quote within the Course of Miracles that talks about if I who can hold planets in the sky and create the tides of the ocean can do all of that, I can handle the petty whims of your life. And I think if we realize that we're not alone, that there is that energy of the universe supporting us, and if we can hand that over, it frees us up to just live synchronistically. And another thing, just quickly from the Course in Miracles that I love, Marianne Williamson talks about, if we imagine the universe like a house and each of us is a lamp, you can have your lamp any way you want. It can have frills, tassels, be any colours that you want. When we create rituals in our life that make space for us, be it mind-body connection, just time out, whatever it looks like for you, we can use that as our lamp to plug into the universe. Because the lamp doesn't have electricity unless it plugs in. And it's a great analogy of when we make time to plug into our maker and our creator, we ourselves have the opportunity to remember what is our blueprint, what is our purpose. And from that electricity, our light shines and we bring our light to the world. And so, some of you might be sitting there thinking, well, how do I live a life of purpose? I really think it comes back to that connection and seeing yourself as a lamp, and every day just trying to plug in, quietening the busyness of our life to be intuitively led, and everything falls into place from there.
I'm Maritza Barone, and thank you for listening to the Things You Can't Unhear podcast. I'd love to keep the conversation going. Let us know what you thought of this episode, and if something really profound came up for you that you want to share, let's talk about it. You can find me on Instagram at Things You Can't Unhear, or on my personal page at Maritza_Barone. And if someone you know will benefit from something that was said in this show, make sure you share it with them too. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and keep up to date with what's next. And if you can spare a few seconds, please rate and review the show on iTunes, just so other people can find us more easily and quickly. And as always, my friends, be happy, be healthy, be conscious, and be kind.